You couldn't even afford a bus fare." Those words, sharp as broken glass, shot out of my son Sebastian's mouth. He stood in the doorway of his new 2-story house in Greenfield Meadows, a monument to his success. He was framed by the warm light, dressed in a designer suit that probably cost more than my monthly paycheck. His architect colleagues, all sharp angles and expensive cologne, stood behind him, glasses in hand. I stood on his porch in the pouring rain, my old work clothes soaked through and stained with mortar. My boots, the ones I'd had for 10 years, squelched in a puddle of my own making. I finished late at the site, Sebastian," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I just need $5 for the bus home. I left my wallet in my other pants." Sebastian looked at me, not like a son looks at his father, but like a man looks at something he's scraped off his shoe. Disgust. Pure, uncut disgust. "Bus fare," he repeated, the word a curse. "I'm in a critical design meeting, and you show up here looking like that, begging for bus fare?" One of his friends, a thin man with slick hair, stepped forward smirking. "Everything all right, Seb? Your handyman having trouble?" "He's my father," Sebastian spat, but the words offered no defense. They were an admission of shame. He turned back to me, his face a mask of cold fury. "You can't even afford a bus fare. Get out of here, you're embarrassing me." His friends laughed, a short, ugly bark. I felt the heat rise in my neck, but I forced a tight smile. I nodded at them, a group of strangers judging me, and then at my son. "Right, sorry to bother you." I turned my back on the warm light, on the laughter, and on the boy I had raised. I walked away from the house, my boots heavy, and stepped back into the pouring rain. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The rain was cold, but my anger was hot. It burned in my chest. You couldn't even afford a bus fare. The words echoed with every splash of my boots on the pavement. He was right. I couldn't. Not the me he saw. Not Connor Con Drummond, the 58-year-old bricklayer. What my brilliant, successful son didn't know was that the me he saw was a ghost, a costume I'd worn for 40 years. What he didn't know was that the calloused, mortar-stained hands he despised had built half of Oakhaven Ridge. What Sebastian didn't know was that as he stood there, humiliating me in his $500,000 house, he was standing in my property. Or at least it would be. Because that same night, while he celebrated his own genius with his smug friends, I was on my way to a late-night meeting. A meeting where I was going to sign the papers to buy his precious home right out from under him. He thought I was worthless. It was time to teach him the real value of things. At 11:30 p.m., I arrived at a different kind of building, an old brick office on Main Street, dark except for a single light on the 3rd floor. The hallway smelled of floor wax and old paper. My boots echoed in the empty hall, a sharp contrast to the plush carpets in Sebastian's house. I knocked 3 times on the frosted glass door. Julian Jules Heston, attorney at law. "It's open, Con?" A low, rough voice called from inside. I pushed the door open. Julian's office was the exact opposite of my son's world. There were no sleek glass tables or minimalist art, just towering shelves of legal books, stacks of yellowed case files, and a thick, comforting smell of tobacco and old wood. Julian sat behind his massive oak desk, a man in his 70s with a thick white mustache and glasses that made his eyes look huge. He'd known me since I was an 18-year-old kid, hauling bricks for his first house. "You look like a drowned rat," he grumbled, pointing to a chair. This better be worth dragging me out of bed for. It is, I said. I set my old, worn leather briefcase, my father's briefcase, on his desk. Julian eyed the briefcase, then me. You're really going through with this, Con? He's your son. Your only son. He stopped being my son tonight, I said. The words tasted like ash. I clicked the two brass latches, and the briefcase sighed open. Inside, there were no legal documents, just stacks and stacks of $100 bills, bound in red rubber bands. I'd counted them 3 times that afternoon, in the solitude of my small 2-room house. Julian let out a low whistle, long and slow. My God, Con, how much is that? $560,000, I said, my voice flat. Exactly what he paid for his house 6 months ago, plus $20,000 for your time and the bank's trouble. In all my years, Julian said, leaning back and rubbing his eyes under his glasses, I have never seen someone pay for a $500,000 house in cash at midnight in the middle of a thunderstorm. Are you absolutely 100% sure about this? I'm sure. He's in the red, Con, Julian said, pulling a thin file from his desk drawer. He slid it across to me. I did what you asked. Pulled his mortgage agreement with First Sterling Bank. He's 3 payments behind. 3 full payments. I stared at the paper. He's delinquent? To the tune of $6,000. The bank sent him a final notice last week. If he doesn't pay the arrears in the next 15 days, they start foreclosure proceedings. He's going to lose the house anyway. The news hit me harder than the humiliation. That afternoon, my son, the successful architect in his designer suit, was bankrupt. And he had never once asked me for help. He would rather spit on me, his own father, than admit he had failed. He preferred to humiliate me than to admit he needed me. Julian pushed a stack of papers and a heavy fountain pen toward me. This is the deed transfer. The bank has already agreed to the buyout. They get their money. You get the house. It's all legal. I uncapped the pen. There are things a father has to do, Jules. My son needs to learn that respect isn't bought with a college degree or a new car. It's earned. I signed my name, Connor Drummond. Clear and steady on every page, every copy. The ink was black and final. It's done, Julian said, stamping the last document with his official seal. He locked the signed papers in his heavy iron safe. I'll be at the public registry the second they open at 9 a.m. By 9:01, you will legally be the owner of your son's house. I nodded, packing the remaining $20,000 back into the briefcase. Yeah, thank you, Jules. Get home safe, Con, he said, his voice softer. And try to get some sleep. I walked out into the rain, which had eased to a steady drizzle. I didn't head for the bus stop. I walked. My house was 2 miles away, but I needed the time. My boots sloshed through the puddles, a steady rhythm on the empty street. 40 years. 40 years of saving every dime. 40 years of investing in cheap, forgotten land on the outskirts of Oakhaven Ridge. Land that everyone called Drummond's Folly until the city expanded, and my worthless scrubland became residential developments. 40 years of building homes for other people while living in the same modest house where I was born. I had built an invisible fortune, brick by silent brick, and the moment had finally arrived to use it. I thought about the look on Sebastian's face when he found out. It was the only thing that kept me warm in the cold, wet night. Sebastian was always different. While the other kids in the neighborhood were playing ball, he was in the yard with pads of paper, drawing houses. Strange, angular houses I couldn't make sense of. When he turned 18, he sat me down at the kitchen table. "Dad," he'd said, "I don't want to be a bricklayer like you." He'd just come back from school, and I was still in my work clothes, covered in dust. I want to design the buildings, not build them with my hands. His words stung, but I understood. Every father wants his son to do better. And I had worked my whole life so he could have that chance. "Okay, son, if that's what you want, we'll make it happen." I sold 3 parcels of land I'd bought in the 70s for pennies. Land that was now worth a small fortune. I paid for his entire education, 5 years at a top-tier university, 5 years where I ate rice and beans, saving every dollar he needed for books, materials, and projects that cost more than my truck. When he graduated, I sat in the audience, wearing my only suit, and watched him walk across the stage in his cap and gown. My son, the architect. My chest swelled with a pride so fierce it almost broke my ribs. It was all worth it. But something changed in Sebastian after college. He got a job at a prestigious firm in Atlanta. He started earning real money. He bought the expensive clothes, the shiny black BMW. He moved into a new condo, and then the house in Greenfield Meadows. And he started to speak differently, as if he'd forgotten where he came from. He still came to visit on Sundays at first, but he was always in a hurry. "Got a client call, Dad." "Have an important meeting, Dad. Clients don't wait." He'd check his phone, tap his expensive shoe, and be out the door before dinner was even on the table. The worst part was how he introduced me to his new, refined friends. "This is my dad," he'd say, his voice flat. He never mentioned I'd built half the houses they probably lived in. At his cousin Brianna's wedding, I overheard him telling someone he'd pulled himself out of poverty through sheer talent and hard work. It was as if I didn't exist, as if those 5 years of university, paid for with my land and my sweat, had just happened. As if he'd been born in that designer suit. The final straw, even before tonight, was when he bought that house in Greenfield Meadows. A $560,000 palace with a 2-car garage and a fountain out front. He invited all his architect friends, his bosses, and his clients. He invited me, as he put it, so I could see how successful people live. I showed up in my best blue shirt, the one I saved for church, and my clean boots. But I was still just a bricklayer. When his guests asked what I did, Sebastian would jump in. "My dad works in construction, very hands-on." He said hands-on like it was a disease. That night, I watched my son show off his new house. His BMW gleamed in the driveway. His elegant friends sipped wine that cost $100 a bottle. And I realized I had raised a stranger who was ashamed of the very hands that had paid for his education, ashamed of the back that had bent for years so he could stand there, bragging about a life he didn't appreciate. What Sebastian didn't know, what none of his friends suspected, was that I knew every brick in that house, every steel rebar, every bag of cement, because I had constructed that entire residential development in 1998, when it was nothing but a vacant lot full of scrub brush. To anyone who saw us at St. Jude's Church at noon on Sundays, we were the perfect Oak Haven Ridge family. Me, Connor Drummond, the respected, hard-working Mason, and my son, Sebastian, the successful architect who never forgot his old dad. We'd sit in the third pew, me in my starched shirt, him in a suit that cost more than my mortgage. "Doesn't Mr. Kahn look proud of his boy?" the ladies would whisper after communion. An example. But it was all a show. After Mass, he'd take me to breakfast at the Oak Haven Grill on Main Street. He always asked for a table on the terrace, where the whole town could see us. "It's important to maintain the image, Dad," he'd say, checking his phone. I'd order catfish and grits. He'd order a spinach salad and imported water. He'd talk about his projects, his clients, his genius. He never asked how I was. He never asked if I needed anything. I was a prop, an old trophy he polished up once a week to prove he was humble. Then, the ritual. He'd drop me off at my little house, get out, and give me a quick, stiff hug for the neighbors to see. "Take care, Dad. I'll call you." But he never did. The only time he called was to tell me he was too busy to come next Sunday. In public, he was the perfect son. In private, he was just gone. What Sebastian didn't know is that my little house was a fortress. It was a disguise. Behind a faded family portrait in my bedroom was a wall safe. And in that safe was the truth. Deeds to 18 properties, bank certificates of deposit, documents worth, at last count, over $5 million. My silent empire. It started in the 1960s. I was 20, working for my first boss, Elias Monroe. "Look, Con," he told me, pointing at a vacant lot. "Construction puts food on the table. Real estate makes you rich. Every dollar you earn, save half. Every cheap piece of land you see, buy it." I did exactly that. For 40 years, every dollar was split. One for the house, one for Sebastian's future, and one for the land nobody wanted. Stony plots, swampy ditches, lots on the edge of town. My first buy was in 1965, a half-acre for $2,000. That land is now the Oak Haven Mall. It's worth over $1 million. But I kept living the same way. Same clothes, same house, same old truck. In 1978, I bought the entire parcel that would one day become Greenfield Meadows. By the 1980s, when Sebastian was in high school dreaming of his architect's life, I already owned most of the town's undeveloped land. But no one knew. I was the builder, never the owner. I worked days as an employee for other firms. At night and on weekends, I raised my own projects. My wife, God rest her soul, thought the extra work was just for Sebastian's college fund. And it was. But it was also for everything else. I developed a perfect system. The deeds were all in the names of nominees I trusted. My friend Martin, my cousin Liam, my brother-in-law Derek. They signed the papers, I managed the business. I gave them each a small percentage and a promise. If anything happened to me, they'd each keep one property. I signed the construction contracts as Connor Drummond, independent contractor. When the houses sold, the money went into 5 different bank accounts in towns 50 miles away, where no one knew my face. To the world, I was just Con, the humble mason. In reality, I was the man building the town around them. Living as a secret millionaire requires a discipline you wouldn't believe. I woke up at 5 a.m., put on my patched work clothes, and went out to sweat for 10 hours, carrying 90-pound cement bags for other bosses. I ate bean tacos wrapped in newspaper. At night, I'd go into my back room, a small office hidden behind an old wardrobe. By the light of a single desk lamp, I'd review bank statements with 6-figure balances. I'd sign rental contracts that brought in more in a month than I earned in a year. I could never buy anything. No new truck, no new clothes, not even a bigger TV. My house stayed exactly the same. The only luxury I allowed myself was a good steak once a week, which I bought from a butcher in the next county so no one in Oak Haven Ridge would see me spending the money. It was a balancing act. 5 years ago, The mayor offered me a multi-million-dollar contract to build the new public market. I could have done it. I had the capital, the men, the experience. But how would a simple mason explain that? I had to refuse. I watched a firm from Atlanta get the job, charge double, and finish 6 months late. The hardest part was the charity. The ladies from St. Jude's would bring me casseroles on Sundays, thinking I couldn't afford a hot meal. The doctor treated my arthritis for free, believing I didn't have health insurance. And I accepted it all. I smiled, said, "God bless you," and hated myself for it. The psychological price was enormous. I had to act like a poor man, accept the pity, and endure the well-meaning, condescending comments. But the most painful part was Sebastian. He bought the act, hook, line, and sinker. To him, I was the poor old man who needed his help. When he'd hand me a $20 bill and say, "Buy yourself something nice, Dad," I'd take it with a grateful nod, my own wallet fat with cash. This charade had worked for 40 years, but on that rainy afternoon, when my son yelled that I couldn't afford a bus fare, something inside me finally broke. 40 years of lies to protect my family, and my son had turned my feigned poverty into a weapon to despise me. The humiliation was worse, so much worse than Sebastian could ever know. The truth was, I already knew he was in trouble. Julian had called me a week ago. "Con, I'm hearing whispers. First Sterling is rattling its sabers. Sebastian's missed a couple of payments." I wanted to help, but how? If I showed up with the money, he'd be suspicious. His pride was already so toxic, so I did something stupid. I tried to be clever. Julian knew a financial mediator who specialized in anonymous payments, a middleman. I met the man in a diner. I gave him $10,000 in cash, enough to cover the arrears and then some. "Just make sure the bank gets this," I told him. "No names. Just apply it to loan number 7749. The man smiled, took the envelope, and vanished. I called his number the next day. Disconnected. I'd been scammed. I'd lost $10,000 trying to save my son's pride. So when I showed up at his house tonight, I wasn't there for $5. I had $200 in my wallet. I was there I don't know, to try and connect, to see his face, to find a way to ask him if he was okay. Without revealing, I knew he was drowning. I used the $5 as an excuse, a clumsy, pathetic excuse, and he'd used it to gut me. When I got home from his house, soaked and shaking with rage, I didn't just sit. I went straight to my safe. I'd done more than just ask Julian about the mortgage. 6 months ago, when Sebastian bought that ridiculous house, I'd hired a private investigator from Atlanta. I needed to know the truth. I pulled out the report. It was all there in black and white with red numbers that screamed. The house, $560,000, mortgaged to the hilt. The BMW, financed for 5 years. He was 2 payments behind. Credit cards, 4 of them, all maxed out. Total debt, $25,000. Late fees piling up. My successful son was completely, utterly broke. He was a fraud, wrapped in a designer suit, and the information hurt more than the insults. He was on the verge of losing everything, and he preferred to sink, preferred to humiliate me, than to admit he needed his useless father. I picked up my old landline phone, the one with the cord. I dialed Julian's home number. It was 9:30 p.m. He knew I'd only call this late if the world was ending. "Con? What's wrong?" he answered, his voice thick with sleep. "I want to buy a house, Jules. Tonight," I said. "What? What are you talking about?" "Sebastian's house. I know he owes the bank. I want to buy it outright, before they take it." There was a long silence. Chuck, are you sure? That's a $500,000 decision. I've spent 40 years gathering this money for something important, I said, my voice cold. And teaching my son a lesson is the most important thing I can do with it. How much cash do you have at your house, Jules? What? Maybe 10,000 in my safe. Why? I'm on my way to you with $3 million in cash. I want you to call the director of First Sterling Bank. Tell him you have a client who will liquidate the entire Dixon mortgage, in cash, tonight, plus a $20,000 commission for his trouble. Another silence. 3 million? Con, I knew you had properties, but I told him everything. The humiliation, the fire alarm, the $10,000 mediator who robbed me, the PI report, the fact that my son was a bankrupt fraud who spat on me. When I finished, Julian sighed, a long, heavy sound. I understand your pain, old friend, but are you sure this is the way? He thinks I'm a failure, Jules. He thinks I'm worthless. It's time for him to learn that judging by appearances is the most expensive mistake he'll ever make. Make the call. All right, Julian said, his voice all business now. I'll get him. Meet me at the office in an hour. By 11 p.m., Julian's office was buzzing. He'd managed to summon Richard Hemlock, the bank director, and a public notary. They both looked rumpled and annoyed. Hemlock, a bald man in his 50s, looked at me in my damp but clean work shirt. Mr. Heston, you dragged me out of bed for this? This is Mr. Drummond, the debtor's father? That's right, Julian said, sliding his desk lamp to the center of the desk. Mr. Drummond, Hemlock said, your son, Sebastian, is significantly delinquent. We appreciate you wanting to help, but a payment plan is... I'm not here to start a payment plan, I interrupted. I heaved my briefcase onto the desk and snapped it open. The stacks of cash sat there, green and silent. Hemlock's jaw went slack. The notary, who had been dozing, sat bolt upright. That's $560,000, I said, the full and total sum of my son's mortgage. And that, I said, pulling the remaining bundles from my bag, is $20,000 for the bank's trouble and $10,000 for the notary. I want the deed. Tonight. Hemlock's eyes, wide and disbelieving, finally met mine. Mr. Drummond, he said, his voice suddenly smooth as silk, I believe we can do business. They were counting the cash, Hemlock's hands moving surprisingly fast, when Julian's private line rang. It was almost midnight. Julian frowned, picking it up. Heston. He listened. His face, normally calm, tightened. Say that again? He listened for another 30 seconds, his eyes finding mine across the desk. He did what? I see. And you're sure? Thank you for this, Patrick. You're doing the right thing. He hung up the phone slowly. Who's Patrick? I asked. One of your son's colleagues, Julian said, his voice grim. The one in the blue shirt. He was at the party tonight. He saw what Sebastian did. He's disgusted. What did he say? Julian leaned forward. It's worse than we thought, Con. The mortgage is just the start. Sebastian's in real trouble. What trouble? He took out a private loan 2 months ago. $50,000 from a loan shark. And to secure it, he used his firm's credentials, forged his boss's signature on the guarantee. I felt the blood drain from my face. That's a crime. It's fraud. It's forgery. It's grand larceny, Julian said. And according to Patrick, the shark is coming to collect. Tomorrow morning. If Sebastian doesn't have the cash, the shark goes to his bosses. Sebastian will be disbarred, fired, and very likely arrested. He'll lose his license. He'll lose everything. I stared at the stacks of money on the table. 560,000. It wasn't enough. My son wasn't just arrogant. He was a criminal. He had betrayed his partners, his colleagues, and me. I looked at Hemlock, who was staring at us, intrigued. Mr. Hemlock, I need to amend our deal. Amend? I'm buying the house, but I also need an immediate cash withdrawal from my account. $50,000, now. Hemlock looked at Julian. He doesn't have an account with us. Yes, he does, Julian said, pulling another file. He's the sole proprietor of Oakhaven Holdings, which has had a 7-figure commercial account with your bank for 20 years. You just know him as OH. LLC. Hemlock's eyes nearly popped out of his head. He looked at my file, then at me, the man in the simple work shirt. You're Oakhaven Holdings? I am, I said, and I need $50,000 in cash in the next 10 minutes, or this whole deal. I tapped the $500,000 on his desk. Walks out the door with me. Hemlock scrambled for his phone. By 2 a.m., it was done. The deed was signed, notarized, and sealed. In my briefcase was the new official deed to 42 Greenfield Lane, and a separate envelope with $50,000 in cash. Julian would handle the loan shark at dawn through a third party. My son was safe. He was no longer in debt to the bank or to a criminal. He was, for the first time in his adult life, completely and totally debt-free. He just didn't own his house anymore. I did. I didn't sleep. I sat in my small kitchen, watching the sun come up, the signed deed on the table in front of me. At 6 a.m., my phone rang. It's filed, Julian said. The registry is updated. You officially own your son's house, Con. The loan shark has also been persuaded to accept the payment and forget your son's name. It's over. It's just beginning, I said. At 8:30 a.m., my friend Martin, one of my nominees, arrived. He was dressed in his best suit, as requested. I handed him a large manila envelope. You're really doing this, brother? He asked, looking at the official stamps on the folder. He's going to get the lesson of his life, I corrected him. You know what to do. You're a process server. You hand him the papers. You tell him it's an urgent legal notification, and he has to sign for receipt. Not one word more. Martin nodded, his face grim. He's not going to know what hit him. He was always an arrogant kid. He was, I said, but today he's just a tenant. I waited. I showered, shaved, and put on my own best clothes. Not a suit, but my dark dress pants, a crisp white shirt, and my good shoes. For the first time in 40 years, I wasn't dressing as the humble mason. I was dressing as the owner. At 9:32 a.m., my phone exploded. Dad, what is this? What did you do? Sebastian's voice was a raw scream of panic and confusion. I took a slow breath. Good morning, son. Did you read the documents Martin delivered? It says you bought my house. That's impossible. It's a joke, right? This is some kind of sick joke. You don't have this kind of money. It's no joke, Sebastian, I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. Last night, I paid your full $560,000 mortgage debt to First Sterling Bank, in cash. Your house is mine now. Your debt is gone. The silence on the other end was deafening. I could hear his sharp, panicked breathing. But, how? You're a bricklayer. You asked me to borrow $5. $5! That's a conversation we need to have in person, son, I said. I'll be waiting for you at your house. Forgive me. At my house. 10 o'clock. We have a lot to talk about. I'm calling the bank. This is a scam. It has to be. You do that, I said. Call the bank. Call the notary. Call whoever you want. The documents are in order. The money has been paid. I'll see you at 10. I hung up the phone. I grabbed my keys, walked out of my little house, and began the 2-mile walk to Greenfield Meadows. I was going to visit my new property. I arrived at 42 Greenfield Lane at 10 a.m. on the dot. I walked up the stone path and knocked on the solid oak door. I didn't knock like I had the day before, a timid, dripping beggar. I knocked like a man who owned the door. It swung open. Sebastian stood there, a complete wreck. He was still in his pajamas, his expensive hair a wild mess. His eyes were red and raw. In his right hand, he clutched the documents Martin had delivered, wrinkled and torn from his grip. "Dad," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Please, tell me this is a joke. Tell me it's not real." "Good morning, Sebastian," I said, my voice polite. "Are you going to invite me into my house?" "Stop saying that," he yelled, stepping back. "This is not your house. You couldn't have. You don't." He didn't step aside out of courtesy. He stumbled back, leaning against the wall for support. I walked past him. The living room was just as I'd seen it. Sleek leather furniture, glass table, the empty whiskey glasses from his critical meeting. But now, it was all mine. "Did you call the bank?" I asked. I sat down on his Italian leather sofa. My sofa. He slumped into an armchair opposite me, the fight gone out of him. "Yes," he mumbled. "I called. I spoke to Director Hemlock himself. He confirmed it. My debt was paid in full last night, by an anonymous party. $560,000, cash." He looked up, his eyes hollow. "It was you. It was really you." How? How, Dad? Where did you get that kind of money? You earn $200 a day. You don't even have a cell phone. You asked me for $5. I reached into my coat and pulled out a thick folder. I'd been preparing it for years, just in case. I placed it on the glass table between us. "It's time you met your father, Sebastian." I pulled out the first document and slid it across the table. "This is the deed to the Oakhaven Mall. I bought the land in 1965. I developed it in 1980. It's worth over $1 million. Sebastian just stared. "What?" I slid him another. "This is the deed to the downtown apartment building. I built it in 1987. It's worth $2 million. "No. These," I added, fanning out 6 more, "are the deeds to the rental homes in the Gardens District. I built them all in the 90s. They're worth about $200,000 each." This can't be true." His hand was trembling as he reached for a deed. "And this," I said, pulling out the last document, "is the deed to the entire Greenfield Meadows development. I bought this land in 1978. I built every house on this street, including this one, in 1998, and sold them. I was the developer, son. Your hands-on father." Finally, I placed 5 bank statements on the table. "And these are my savings. 5 different banks. Total assets. Just over $7 million. Sebastian picked up one of the bank statements. His eyes scanned the numbers, the name Oakhaven Holdings, and the address, which was my little 2-room house. He read it, then read it again. The color drained from his face. He dropped the paper as if it had burned him. "Why?" he whispered, his voice broken. "Why did you never tell me? Why live like that?" "Because," I said, my voice hard and cold, I wanted you to value the work before you knew the results. I wanted you to respect the effort before you saw the reward. I wanted to raise a humble son, not an arrogant one. But his face crumpled. I treated you yesterday. I, yes, son, I said, leaning forward. You did. You yelled at a man you thought was worthless, telling him he couldn't even afford a bus fare. And now, that same worthless man, that simple bricklayer, has just bought the house of the successful architect. An architect who was so broke, so deep in debt, he was about to lose everything. An architect who was so arrogant, he never once had the courage to ask his father for help. That broke him. Sebastian collapsed, folding in on himself. He buried his face in his hands and began to cry. Not quiet tears, but deep, racking sobs. The kind I hadn't heard from him since he was a little boy who had fallen off his bike. Dad, he choked out. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I had no idea. I know you didn't, son, I said. Now that was the whole problem. He cried for a long time. The documents, my entire life's secret, lay scattered on the glass table between us. Finally, he lifted his head, his face a swollen red mask of shame. Dad, he said, his voice choked. I need to make a call. I need to tell someone. He picked up his phone, his hands shaking so badly he could barely dial. He punched in a number. Aunt Victoria, he said. My sister, his confidant. He put the phone on speaker. Sebastian, baby? What's wrong? Her voice was warm and concerned. You sound awful. Auntie, he sobbed. Dad just bought my house. He paid off my whole mortgage, $560,000. There was a long, dead silence on the line. Spencer. Sebastian, what are you talking about? Your dad bought your house? Are you drunk? Your dad is a mason. He lives in that little house. He barely gets by. That's what I thought, Sebastian yelled, his voice cracking. That's what we all thought. But it's a lie, Auntie. It's all been a lie. He's rich. He's a millionaire. He owns properties all over town. He has millions in the bank, and he never told us. He's been pretending to be poor for 40 years. Another long silence. Then Victoria's voice, small and trembling. Put your father on the phone. Now. Sebastian handed me the phone. Hello, Victoria, I said. Charles Drummond, she snapped, her voice shaking with a mixture of astonishment and fury. You are going to explain to me what is going on. Is what my nephew is saying true? It's true, Vic. I bought his house last night. He was about to lose it. But the money? How? Chuck, I've been sending you my husband's old coats for 10 years, thinking you couldn't afford a new one. You've made me look like a fool. You've lied to all of us. Her voice broke at the end. Sebastian stared at me, his eyes wide with a new horror. Aunt Victoria helped you? Your aunt, I said, looking right at him. Your cousins, the neighbors at church, half the town. Everyone believed I was a poor old man who needed charity, and I let them. Because I thought it was better for them to see me as humble than to know the truth. I can't believe this, Victoria whispered on the phone. I'm driving down from Atlanta, today. I have to see this with my own eyes. She hung up. Before Sebastian could even speak, his phone buzzed again. It was a text. He read it, his face going pale. Who? I asked. It's my cousin Brianna. She wants to know if it's true, that you're a millionaire. How does she know? Your Aunt Victoria, I said. His phone immediately rang again. He looked at the screen. It's Sandra, my colleague. He answered, Sandra? How? I could hear her shouting through the phone. Sebastian! Miles is telling everyone at the firm that your father is some secret real estate tycoon and he just bought your house. Is that true? Sebastian looked at me, his eyes wide with panic. Dad, by this afternoon, the entire town is going to know. Good, I said, getting up from the sofa. It's been 40 years. It's time the truth came out. Just then, my own cheap flip phone rang. I looked at the number. City Hall. Hello? Mr. Drummond? Mr. Connor Drummond? A voice asked. Speaking. This is Mayor Talbot's office. The mayor requests an urgent meeting with you. As soon as possible. It's regarding, certain real estate discrepancies. I'll be there in an hour, I said. And I'm bringing my son. We arrived at City Hall. Sebastian walked beside me like a ghost, his face pale, still in his wrinkled pajamas from the morning. I'd made him come as he was. The secretary at the front desk looked at him, then at me, then quickly looked away. We were shown straight into Mayor Talbot's office. He was a large man, and he stood behind his desk, which was covered in thick, dusty binders and plat maps. Mr. Drummond, he said, not offering to shake hands. We have a confusing situation. I've been reviewing construction records for the last 40 years. Your name appears as the primary contractor on 18 major projects. That's correct, I said. Yes, but you were never listed as the owner. The owners were always LLCs, Oakhaven Holdings, Ridge Development, Pineview Properties. He tapped a stack of papers. My assistants have been digging all morning, ever since we got a call from First Sterling Bank. It turns out all those LLCs trace back to a single P.O. box, which traces back to you. Mr. Drummond, can you explain why you've kept this a secret? When I started in the 60s, Mayor, this was a small town, I said. Envy and jealousy destroyed more businesses than bad luck. I decided to work in silence. It was just easier. Easier? Talbot looked at Sebastian, then back at me. Mr. Drummond, do you realize that you, not the city, not the Atlanta firms, you developed almost half of Oakhaven Ridge? The mall, the Gardens District, the apartment building downtown, and, he looked at a map, Greenfield Meadows, the very development where your son lives. Sebastian made a small, choking sound. You built my house, Dad? You didn't just... You built my neighborhood? I did, I said. And I also own the land where they're planning to build the new high school, and the parcel for the new regional hospital. Mayor Talbot sat down heavily in his chair. The hospital, he said, rubbing his forehead. That project is stalled. We need a principal investor. We need $2.5 million, and we were about to go begging to Atlanta for it. You don't need to, I said. Talbot looked up. What? I'll build it. The entire hospital. Myself. No partners, no bank loans. My gift to the town. Sebastian's jaw dropped. Dad, $2.5 million? I have $7 million in assets, son, I said quietly. What good is it sitting in a bank? The mayor stood up slowly. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. Mr. Drummond, Connor, I don't know what to say. I officially invite you to join the Economic Development Council for this town. We need you. I accept, I said, on one condition. Anything. My son, Sebastian. He's a brilliant architect, but he's lost his way. I want him to be the principal architect for all future public projects, starting with the hospital. He needs to learn that you build things for a community, not just for your own ego." Sebastian looked at me, his eyes filling with tears again. "Dad, after how I treated you, you would do that?" "Everything I did, son," I said, "I did for you. I'm not going to stop now. You're just going to start earning it." We left City Hall. The walk back to my little house was silent. Sebastian walked beside me, his head down. For the first time in years, he wasn't looking at his phone. He was just walking, thinking. When we got to my cracked driveway, he stopped. He looked at the small two-room house he'd grown up in, the house he'd been so ashamed of, so desperate to escape. He looked at it as if he'd never seen it before. He turned to me, his voice barely a whisper. "Dad, can I come in?" "It's your house, son," I said, walking to the door. "It's always been your house." But we both knew something had changed forever. He wasn't the successful son visiting his poor father out of pity. He was the son who had lost everything, visiting the father who had everything. We sat in the kitchen, at the same wooden table where I'd made the decision to buy his house just the night before. He looked around, his eyes tracing the cracks in the wall I'd never bothered to fix. The old stove, the faded portrait of his mother that hid the safe. "Dad," he said after a long silence, "did you ever get tired of it? Of pretending?" "Every day, son," I said. "Every single day. Every time you came home from college and talked down to me. Every time you introduced me as your hands-on father. Every time you looked at me with that shame. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell you the truth." "Then why didn't you?" "Because I was afraid. I was afraid that if I told you, you'd think respect could be bought. You'd think you were better than other people because your father was rich, not because you were a good person. I wanted you to be humble." "But I wasn't," he whispered, staring at his hands. "I was a monster. Yesterday, I said, I realized my plan had failed. The money I'd kept from you, it had changed you anyway. You became arrogant, dismissive, and cruel. And the worst part, Sebastian, you became all those things with money you didn't even have. You were a fraud." His tears fell onto the old wood table. "You're right. I was. I became everything I always hated. Those arrogant kids at school, the bosses who humiliate their employees. I was ashamed of you, ashamed of your hands." "The problem wasn't your education, son," I said. "The problem was you forgot where it came from. You forgot that every book, every project, every semester was paid for by these." I put my hands on the table. Calloused, scarred, the nails broken, the skin like leather. "These hands you despised. They paid for your entire life." Sebastian reached out and took my hands in his. He held them, turning them over, tracing the scars with his own smooth fingers. "They gave me everything," he whispered, "and I treated them like they were dirt." He looked up, his eyes clear for the first time in years. "Dad, I want to learn. I want you to teach me. Not about architecture, about this, how you built all of this. I want to work with you, not for you. With you." I looked at him, my son, broken and remade, sitting at my humble kitchen table. "Are you sure?" I asked. "It's hard work. You'll get your hands dirty. You won't be able to brag to your friends anymore." "I don't have any friends," he said. "And I don't want to brag. I just want you to be proud of me. For the right reasons." I stood up and went to the old wardrobe. Not the one with the safe, another one. From the bottom drawer, under a stack of old blankets, I pulled out a set of rolled-up blueprints. "If you really want to work," I said, "this is our first project. Together." I spread them on the table. The New Horizons subdivision. 100 affordable homes for working families. Decent, beautiful, strong houses. You'll be the architect. I'll be the developer. And we'll be the builders. Both of us. He stared at the blueprints, his architect's eye taking in the designs. "Dad, this is incredible. This is good work. How long have you been planning this?" 5 years, I said, waiting for the right partner. And I think I've finally found him. I'm sitting on the same wooden porch of my little house. It's 6 a.m. A pickup truck, covered in dust and mud, pulls into my driveway. It's not a BMW. Sebastian sold that to pay off his credit card debts. He gets out, wearing work boots and a tool belt. His hands, I notice, are calloused. He has a small scar on his knuckle from a slipped hammer. He's smiling. "Morning, Dad," he says, grabbing a coffee thermos from the passenger seat. "The concrete is being poured for the last foundation at New Horizons at 7. We'd better get moving." The New Horizons subdivision is almost finished, and Sebastian designed every house, thinking about the families who would live there, not about what design awards he could win. The new Oak Haven Regional Hospital has its frame up, a steel skeleton rising against the sky with a large sign out front. "Lead Architect, Sebastian Drummond." The town doesn't see me as the poor old mason anymore. I still go to Mass at St. Jude's, but now people shake my hand. They don't pat my shoulder with pity. Sebastian sits next to me, not checking his phone, not looking at the clock. He's just there, with me. My sister Victoria came down and apologized. "We're mending things. It will take time. You don't undo 40 years of lies in a day. The house in Greenfield Meadows, the one that started all this, it's still technically mine. Sebastian lives there. I drew up a lease agreement. He pays me $1 a month. He pays it on the first of every month, a single dollar bill he hands me. Not for the money, but as a reminder. A reminder that respect isn't a given. It's earned every single day. Last night, as we were finishing the blueprints for the hospital's second wing, Sebastian looked at me. "Dad," he said, "I hope my kids, when I have them, get to know their grandfather, the man who built half this town, and the man who never felt he was better than anyone for doing it." Julian told me something last week that stuck with me. "Con," he said, "in 50 years as a lawyer, I've seen rich men use their money to humiliate people. I've never seen a man use his wealth to teach a lesson in humility." I could have yelled at Sebastian that rainy night. I could have bragged about my fortune. But I chose another way. I chose to show him, not tell him, that judging a man by his clothes or his job is the most expensive mistake you can ever make. True wealth isn't in a bank account. It's in the work of your hands. It's in the respect you earn. And it's in knowing that at the end of your life, you built something that will last. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.